Every once in a while, I'll be scrolling on social media and these guys pop up that claim they're multi-quazillionaires. Usually there's this one guy, I don't know why. There's this guy that like sits in this mansion and, says things. And it's like the weirdest spot in the mansion that you can kind of it'd be like having a desk right in the middle of your foyer or foyer, depending on where you're. I'm like, who does that? It's really bizarre. But they're claiming to be, or like the guy from, many of you probably don't know this, but about 10 years ago, there was a guy, I'm not going to name names, but he would show up in a commercial and he would have a Lamborghini, be in his garage. And then there's like all these books. There's like a library in the garage. And then, he's sitting. Everybody knows the commercial that's old enough that says it. But yeah, basically he says the only reason why you're rich is because of knowledge. Um, there's all these people that pop up and they claim to be multi-gazillionaires or multi-millionaires, and they have the same shtick. Usually it's very much some sort of, guy that looks like he's on testosterone treatments, very severe testosterone treatments. And they're sort of selling this, driving around in, fancy car living and jets living, going around in private jets and all that kind of stuff. And it's really quite funny when you see this. But I there's 2 points I often think about this, right? Is that maybe they're quite possibly right. Maybe their life, and this is what they're essentially is selling, and you're supposed to make an inference from, is that their life is so much better off if they follow their program, their, 5-step, whatever it is. Um, when you do it, their life is incredibly good. Um, and that your life, you're going to be like them, have all of this kind of stuff. You follow what's going on. Inevitably, everybody that follows these things, it ends up being disaster. They, get $500 from you and then they disappear out of your life. And then you're like, whoa, that was dumb. And then you're so embarrassed that you did it that you never talk about it. It just kind of disappears, right? And then it just is never mentioned um, ever. And so these people go about scamming and all that. It's the same old snake oil salesman stuff that's happened for millennial. So on one thing, it very might be true that their life is better off. I often think about that, right? Like, okay, so yes, having more money is a benefit. And I often think about that. It's like, okay, if I get more money today, is my life fundamentally better off? I think often it is, right? Like even in my life, and I would consider myself, I'm not like, there's no brag factor here, but I just know the statistics. I grew up in a very fortunate country. I grew up in Canada. And I had very fortunate parents that were very stable. And I know the odds of that impacting my life is, first of all, the odds of that is like incredibly slim to none. At the time, there's probably 25 million people that lived in Canada. And the world probably had 5 billion at the time, 4 billion, probably 3 or 4 billion people when I was born. So, the chance of that is essentially impossible. It's like 1 in a million. And then on top of that, to have parents that were stable. We had things in our family, but relatively stable, that kept their shit together. Um, you know, that alone in Canada is probably a 1 in 10,000 chance, right? Like of having stable, well-adjusted parents. Um, And then on top of it, right? So you compound this, right? So it's one in a million, so you're looking at like one in probably 1 in 100 million chance. And then I grew up male as well, right? Like of having sort of things work out. And I grew up with also, teachers that cared, like all these kind of things just worked out in my favor. So, I feel extraordinarily fortunate to be, um, where I'm at and who I am, and to have access to resources more than virtually anybody in this world, right? Just because of where I grew up, and it's stupid, right? And I feel deeply fortunate about that. But you know, even so, having a little bit more money is great. And I think about, if I was sort of as played on these, these kind of comical characters that you see, the sort of tatted up all, yeah, you've seen them. There's, even people that are probably spectacularly famous, that have their own podcast shows that are all tatted up and very wealthy. That, you know, um, if I followed that life, would it be better off, right? Like, if I had more money, could I hire people, to run my life, to do all the dirty work, right? Like, probably have a cleaner for the house, somebody that did my errands, virtual assistant, and all that kind of stuff, did my errands. Would my life be better off? And the truth is, often no, right? Let me explain why, right? The truth is that coordinating across all of these people is spectacularly hard. Right? So anybody that has run a business or had a leadership role will realize that people are flaky, and you will know that people lie, cheat, and steal across the board. Doesn't matter where they are, how successful they are. They just people do that kind of stuff. They're flaky. Um, and what you'll realize is that it's hard to find these trusting relationships where you can trust on people that will just do their thing to show up. So even when you want to you want a babysitter, for example, or you want, babysitters really incredibly hard for us. We had the resources to get a babysitter, but it was spectacularly hard to find babysitters that would be willing to do things, and we paid well above market rates. Um, it's the same as finding somebody to clean your house. We have somebody that cleans our house right now, is a wonderful person, but it took us forever to finally find somebody. So, even when you have all of these resources that are given to you and to sort of have this display, um, that the life is not what is sold. It is not what is advertised at all. And there is a lot of challenges that you face. And I think about this with, um, that the house that, let's say, the displays, there's one guy that shows on my social media that lives in this giant mansion, or so he says, right? So that's the second thing I want to tackle. Even if you get that, like you have that life and you've got a 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 square foot house. I live and I know that some of you are gonna be flabbergasted, but my house is 2,000 square feet, which in a um, in the city I'm at, it's really square in the middle. Um, in the, it's probably even on the smaller side. That it's not that big, but it suits us perfectly well. Um, but when you get these giant houses, these enormous houses that are like warehouses, then that means you have to pay for all of the other things that go on, that break, that don't work. And you have to clean it and do all that kind of maintenance stuff. So the image that is displayed, that, your life it's gonna be so much fun, you're gonna be sitting at the pool, doesn't exist. Because if somebody doesn't show up to clean your house, somebody has to do, and it's likely going to be you. So just be well aware of that is a difficult thing, right? And essentially, you're managing a large business at that moment where you have, you're managing a Walmart, and you can imagine how many people come and go. And managing a Walmart is not fun. It's a difficult task, and you're doing the same thing with your own home. That you have to manage all these things. It's incredibly difficult to do, and you have to meet with people that often is annoying, and you don't like doing those particular things. So just be well aware of that when you're following that image. Now, the second thing I want you to be well aware of, whenever you see these things, know they are selling you something. They're selling you an image that often is completely unattainable, that is usually ridiculous, in terms of what they preach. If you want to know the basic things and do well, just pick up a really simple personal finance book, or any number of books that are in the genre that are not sold by somebody that is like trying to sell you crap, right? And the quickest way I can see that is if somebody is trying to tell you to go buy index funds and mutual funds and live your life simply, um, that's somebody that you should be paying attention to, right? So I am always like, oh, if they're trying to get me to buy some program or system or whatever, I run. Um, and it's just because they're selling a life it's not real. Nothing about it is real. Um, and even if you had that life, right? Like it's almost for males. I apologize if this is like, sexist, but there'll be like this stu- silly guy that's all tatted up. It's got all, steroids galore, and there'll be like 3 or 4 pretty girls that are beside the side. Imagine running that. Imagine having that life where you're trying to balance 3 or 4 or 5 other people that you care about on your side. It's just a nightmare. Like, I don't wanna be part of any of that drama. It's hard enough, like, I've got my wife and 2 kids. It's hard enough, and, dealing with my mom and, my family and all that kind of stuff. It's hard enough. Y What I'm saying is don't buy in to any of that stuff. Um, Try to look at, okay, if I wanted to be a successful person, who do I know that's close to me that is successful? That's a real human being that I know that is not on display someplace. That's a real human being doing real human stuff, that has a real life that you really care for, and that is not flashing around and all that kind of crap. Um, you know, who are those people? Target those people and talk to them and see what they actually did. And they'll tell you some pretty simple things. Pay off your debts, save money. Ideally, you save 15% of everything you make. Probably 20% is better, but ideally, somewhere around 50% of everything you make goes into index funds and mutual funds. Get your basic insurances, like life insurance if you have kids until they're grown and gone. Um, you know, Things like health insurance if you're in the United States, decent health insurance. You do those things and you do that long enough and you repeat for 30, 40, 50 years, you're going to be wealthier beyond your wildest dreams, and you'll have a nice life. And that's it. Simple, 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 but very hard to do. All right. Take care. Have a wonderful day.